announcement has been paid for by the new Howl Order.
Whether the team is giving us the highest of highs or the bluest of blues, cover it all here in Commander's Nightly News. I, of course, am your host, Louie T. Thank you for joining me. Let's get to tonight's lead story. So, Washington is heading into familiar territory, but the outcome of the second game of the season hasn't been very favorable to the good guys after winning the first game of the season. As I've mentioned to you before, since Ron Rivera has come on board, Washington has won 3 out of 4 week 1 contests. However, in the previous 2 times that Washington has won in week 1 under Ron Rivera, we've gone on massive losing streaks thereafter. In 2020, Washington lost 5 straight after winning their first contest of the year. And in 2022, last season, Washington won week 1 and then lost 4 straight before winning their next game. So this is a big game for obvious reasons. And we haven't been 2-0. Think about this. I told you there are a lot of nasty streaks that exist with this organization that need to be broken this year. I think this is a big year because I think this is the time to wipe the slate clean, turn the page, and start anew, right? That's what the celebration before the start of the season, toasting to the season, that's what that was, wiping away some of the sins, right? Moving past the past and starting anew, right? Here's an opportunity to knock off one of the nastier and egregious streaks that Washington is currently on. And we've got plenty of them that we can choose from this year that we're hoping to knock off. But this is the first one that we've encountered. We haven't been 2-0 since 2011. That's right, over a decade. It's been over a decade since we've started the season 2-0. Do you know what you have to do to start 2-0? You know how simple it is? You just got to win the first 2 games of the season. We haven't been able to do that in 12 years almost. This is insane. And the last quarterback to do it, if you recall, was Rex Grossman. Back in 2011, Ryan Kerrigan's rookie season, if you remember the first game of the year, we beat the Giants. Kerrigan gets a pick 6, and we beat the Giants, I think, 28-14. And we start that season off 2-0, and he was talking big cash. I'm talking about big cash money shit about how we about to win the NFC East and this, that, and the third. And that man, I think he was benched by week 5, I think, week 4 or 5. Anyway, this is a big game, and we're going to talk about the angle of this game from the Broncos perspective a little bit later on as we go behind enemy lines. But this is a big game for them as well. But this is big. I don't care about the Denver Broncos right now. We're talking about us. It's about us. All right. This is a big game for us. And not just because we want to start 2-0, and not because I think we play in the best division in football and we need to keep pace with the likes of the Cowboys and Eagles, but because of what lies ahead. You got Buffalo and Philadelphia as your next 2 opponents looking ahead on the schedule. You could easily do the same thing we did last year and 3 years ago in 2020 and win the first game and then lose your next 3 or 4 or 5 games. It's not out of the realm of possibility. You go to Denver, you trip up there, lose, come back home. Buffalo gets their shit together against Vegas this week and then comes to Washington, mauls you, or just beats you. It doesn't have to be an ass kicking. They just got to score 1 more point than us. And then you got to head to Philadelphia the week after that. Shit could go downhill really quickly if you don't win this game, right? You could lose this game and then win the next 2 games, right? Anything could happen, but losing sucks. And as we talk about all the time, winning begets winning and losing begets losing. You don't want to taste losing because then the taste starts to become familiar. So this is a big one for Washington. Not only because we can end this nasty streak that exists right now, but it's huge for the psyche. We keep talking about it feels different. Nothing's actually different until you prove that it's different. We went 1-0 last season. We did it in improbable come from behind fashion last season, just like we did it this season. Now, opponents were a little bit different, but they really weren't all that different. The circumstances were different last year, but they really aren't that different. You want it to be different? Make it different. Show us. Don't tell us. Show us. Go to Denver, find a way to get it done, and come back 2-0. For the first time since 2011, which is crazy. Let's get to in other news. So, obviously, today's coordinator day. And so typically you would have me talking about what was said by Jack Del Rio and offensive coordinator Eric Bieniemy. Clearly, that is not going to be the case, but I'm going to guess as to what they said. EB is probably going to talk about collectively dragging their asses across the finish line, which they were able to do in week 1. It wasn't pretty, but that's what they did. They did exactly what he said they're going to set out to do every week, which is collectively drag their ass across the finish line. And that's what they did, literally, in the game against Arizona in week 1. And I think he's going to reiterate that. Hey, guys, it doesn't have to be pretty. There's some things we got to clean up. But you know what we did? We won the football game. We drug our asses collectively across the finish line, and we're 1-0. And we're going to look to duplicate that again in week number 2 against the Denver Broncos on the road. And Bieniemy is probably going to be asked about his experience in Denver because he played or he coached with the Chiefs in that division against the Denver Broncos twice a year. The altitude, is there a real issue? Is that a real factor? What to expect in Denver since he's been there multiple times. Each of the last, 5 years, he's been there at least once. So they're going to ask him about Denver, and they're going to ask him about that, and he'll have some things to say about that. And I'm assuming that he's going to talk about Sam and the growth of this offense and things that they need to improve upon, but he's not going to get into specifics. He's just going to talk about some of the things that he feels like they can do better. And he's going to harp on the fact that they're still growing, that there's a lot of good football in this team, and that they're going to continue to grow. So I think that's what you're going to hear from him. Jack is probably going to keep it pretty much status quo. Hey, look, you're not going to get a lot out of Jack. He's not going to talk about, game plan. He's not going to boast about what they did in week 1 against Arizona. He's going to essentially say, hey, we got to do it again. They're going to ask him about Montez Sweat, about the offseason, and, how this is supposed to be a big year for Sweat going into a contract year, and how Jack had talked about he needed to finish and how he finished in week 1. And Jack's going to say, yeah, he's got to continue to do that, but that's exactly what we're looking for. These are the things that I think you're going to hear in the press conference. And we'll see. This will be a great experiment of sorts to see if they're that predictable, right? Anyway, let's look at the injury report. Obviously, I don't have the updated version, but what I'm going to attempt to do here is essentially predict what is going to happen here. So, Quan Martin's out of this game, so DNP for him on Thursday as well. Curtis Samuel with the hip, I think, will be a full participant on Thursday. Chase Young neck will still be limited on Thursday. Sam Cosmi, full participant with the shoulder. And Terry McLaurin, I think, will be a full participant with the toe on Thursday as well. And so you're trending towards everyone on this list outside of Quan Martin and Chase Young playing in the game on Sunday. As you get to the Denver Broncos side of things, Greg Dulcich is going to be out of this game with the hamstring injury, so we can already book him and have him out of this game. Frank Clark, hip injury. I think he'll be limited again, but I expect him to play on Sunday. I wouldn't be shocked if he's a full participant on Thursday, but I think he's going to be limited again. He's a veteran. I think he'll be limited again and be ready to go on Sunday. Jerry Jeudy. So I was reading some articles, man. It sounds like his ass going to play this weekend. I'm like, shit. I was trying to avoid him. I thought being that we were the second week of the season and they were talking about him missing upwards of 4 games potentially to start the year, I was thinking, we should be straight. Worst case scenario, he's back week 3. We just miss him. Clearly that is not the case. I think he's going to play. He may be limited again Thursday, but I'm expecting this dude to play. He sounds like a man that's going to play on Sunday. DJ Jones need limited. I think he will be a full participant on Thursday. Same with Riley Moss, abdomen. I think he'll be a full participant on Thursday as well. And so everybody on this list, I think outside of Greg Dulcich, is trending towards playing for the Denver Broncos on Sunday. So with that said, let's go ahead and go behind enemy lines. So as you can see right now, the Denver Broncos head into this game as favorites. The Commanders are 3.5 point underdogs. All right, so they're plus 3.5 heading into this game. Vegas, and I gotta say this because I never circled back to talk about this because I was flat out wrong. And look, Vegas usually is right. Okay, they built buildings in Vegas off the strength of them knowing what the hell they're talking about. Okay, so I was incredulous last week when I talked about the point spread, how it's just 7, and I thought it was a bit disrespectful, but I was like, that's cool. We got to show them. They don't believe in us. But the number that really chapped my ass, the number that really pissed me off was the 38, the over under 38, right? And I said, oh man, that's super disrespectful because I'm looking to score 30 by my damn self, right? I was hoping we scored 30 on our own merit. To hell with what Arizona does. If we score 31 and they score 7, that's fine. That's your 38, right? You push. But we did our part. But I was looking to score 30 on our own. And lo and behold, Vegas set the over-under at 38. And we scored 36 points combined between the two teams. And so, once again, Vegas remains undefeated. All right, especially when it comes to this team, they seem to really hit the nose on the head, which is not good for us with the line for the game being at 3.5 for the Broncos. But in any event, this is going to be a fascinating game because I said this earlier in the week. It's like staring in the mirror. This is a Broncos team that doesn't score a bunch of points, plays exceptional defense, looks to limit the amount of mistakes that they make. They didn't make any in week 1 in terms of turnovers and find a way to win the game by outlasting their opponent, right? It's a war of attrition when you play Denver. So I wanted to know what the sense was in Denver right now after losing to the Vegas Raiders 17-16 in week number 1. And it reminds me a lot of Detroit last season after losing to Philadelphia in week 1, having started the season off with 2 home games in a row. You can't afford to drop your first 2 home games of the season. It's just brutal. If you're expecting to have a playoff season, you can't do that if you're losing games at home, especially the first 2 of the season. So they're in full desperation mode. Even though all the players are saying all the right things, it's not a must-win game. You're desperate every single week. This is the NFL. Every game counts, all of that good stuff. All of the shit you're supposed to say. There's a heightened level of desperation for Denver this week because they don't want to start 0-2, especially at home. It's a little bit different if you start 0-2 and both of those games are on the road and hey, we're going home for the next 2 and we got a chance to flip the script and turn this thing around. They're going on the road for the next 2 games after this. They can't afford to lose their second straight road game. And so there's going to be a heightened sense of intensity and desperation. And we can't allow the Denver Broncos to be and remember what I said last year? The Lions were the desperate team last year. They were the way more desperate team. And it showed. They looked like a team that was fighting for their lives in week number 2 last year. And we came out looking like we were resting on our week 1 victory and said, hey, we got a little bit of cushion here, a margin for error because we won last week. So we don't actually need this game. It's cool if we lose. And they kicked our ass and we're up 22-0 at the half. So I'm hoping that Washington learned from that experience last year because they're going into a very similar situation. Team facing 0-2 and staring it in the face with 2 straight home losses. Can't afford to have that happen to start their season off. And here's a couple of things that I found interesting in, reading up on the Broncos and what they are looking to accomplish in week number 2 and some of the things that they felt like went wrong in week number 1. So, we talked about the low scoring nature of the Broncos. Well, I told you they were ultra efficient in week 1. Remember I told you that? I said Russell Wilson was never in danger of turning it over. He was 27 of 33, which is super efficient. Again, not a lot of chunk plays there, only 177 yards, 5.5 yards per attempt. So again, nothing earth shattering there, but highly efficient. They ran for over 4 yards a carry. All right. So efficient in the run game. And so the Broncos gained at least 3 first downs on 5 of their 6 possessions. Yes, they only had 6 possessions in the game, and I'm going to explain to you why. Meanwhile, for context, Washington had 13 possessions in week number 1 against Arizona, and the Cardinals had 11. The Broncos had 6 possessions in the game against Vegas on Sunday, and the Raiders had 7. Okay, so the pace of play, much slower. Why? Because the Broncos are possessing the football. The Broncos scored on 3 possessions in Sunday's loss to the Raiders. 2 of those possessions ate up over 8 minutes of game clock. Understanding that that is literally a half of a quarter. They did that twice in the game where they ate up a half of a quarter. So essentially they cut a half in 2 possessions. They cut a half in 2 possessions. That's why they only had the ball 6 times. That's why the Raiders only had the ball 7 times, because the Broncos were hoarders. Okay? They only went 3 and out once in the game. And they didn't turn the ball over, right? They didn't have any turnovers, no self-inflicted wounds, and they converted 5 of 11 third downs. So almost 50% of their third downs were converted in that game. And you ask yourself, well, damn, why they only score 16 points? Because when you nickel and dime, you dink and dunk, and everything comes so hard. And this is the argument I've been making with us. And you guys got bent out of shape the other day when I said we need more explosive plays out of the run game. And somebody's like, hey, you just need to gain 4 yards a carry. That's all you need, 4 or 5 yards a carry. Well, the Broncos averaged 4.4 yards a carry in their week 1 contest. Very efficient on the ground. Russell Wilson, very efficient. They were efficient with their offensive drives. 5 of the 6, they got 3 or more first downs. 2 of their drives spanned over 8 minutes of the clock. They dominated time of possession in their first game against the Raiders, and they still lost. Why? Because everything has to be perfect when you play that way. If there's any fan base that knows that that's how that works, it's us. We led the NFL in time of possession last year. What difference does it make if everything has to go perfect for you to score 23 points? You know what happens when you rush for 4.4 yards a carry and your quarterback's averaging 5.5 yards per attempt? You know what happens? 1 bad snap kills your drive. You're going and you're moving it down the field. You've gotten 3 first downs. You just finally made it because you're nickel and diming. You just finally made it over midfield. You're in plus territory at the Raiders' 43-yard line. And then you get a sack. Or now you got a false start penalty. Or you got a holding penalty. And this offense, who's doing a great job of staying ahead of the sticks, now they're behind the sticks. Instead of 2nd and 6, it's 2nd and 11. You throw your little dump down and check down to the running back for 4 yards at 3rd and 7. And now you try to throw a 9-yard pass. It's incomplete and you got to punt. Or you can go for it. But because you have a stout defense, you're going to punt, play the field position game and see if you can pin them and see if you can't get great field position back on the other end of that thing. We know that all too well. I used to call the 40 to the 40 last year the vortex. Don't get sucked in. Because we would have drives where we'll pick up 3 first downs, Does this not sound familiar to you? Where you pick up 3 first downs, drive started at your own 17-yard line, you pick up 3 first downs, you look up, oh, damn, look, we're in plus territory at the opposing team's 46-yard line. And then all hell breaks loose. Holding penalty, false start, sack, a batted ball. Next thing you know, it's 4th and 4 and you're making a decision. Do we go for it? Do we punt? And Ron says, let's just punt it. Drive over, right? Sam took a bad sack last week that knocked us out of field goal range. That's what happens when you nickel and dime. So you know what the Broncos are saying this week? What the emphasis is? We need explosive plays. We had none last week. We need explosive plays. That's what they're working on this week. So you know what that means? We better make sure we keep everything in front of us. Nothing cheap, nothing deep. Make them continue to be an efficient nickel and dime offense. And what our job is to come in and affect that 5 of 11 with the shit that we do well, one of the best in the NFL, and that's get off the field on 3rd downs. You want to go 5 of 11 against the Raiders? That's fine. We're going to make sure you're 2 of 11 this week. That's what our job is. But don't give up the deep shit. They're going to try it this week. Because the nickel and dime, efficient, don't turn it over, ball control, win time of possession, that shit didn't work last week. So you know what they're going to do? They're going to try something different. Let's see if we can't get over the top on this Commanders defense. You know what else they're saying? Hey, we got to block up those 2 guys in the middle. We know that those guys are game wreckers. So what they're going to do is put extra emphasis on trying to neutralize Allen and Payne inside, which means the guys on the outside are going to have to win. That's how they're going to try to take those deep shots. They're going to chip Montez Sweat. They're going to double team on the inside, and they're going to give whomever is opposite of Sweat a one-on-one matchup, and that guy's going to have to win. And if he doesn't, Russell Wilson's going to have time, and they're going to try to take some shots down the field. That is their game plan. Take away Payne and Allen inside. Get a piece of Sweat. You can't double team everybody, but get a piece of Sweat and then try to take your shots down the field. We have to guard against the big ball down the field. They didn't do it last week. That's not who they are, but they're getting Jerry Jeudy back, and that means they're getting explosiveness back. So we better be prepared. Because if we give up the big ball next week or this week against Denver, chances are we're not coming home with a dub. Make them earn everything that they get. Defensively, they're going to blitz. Because right now on film, it's a quarterback and an offense that doesn't handle pressure well right now. So they're not going to blitz the draws off of us. Okay, they're not going to come after it because that's not what they did against the Raiders last week. But understand that Jimmy Garoppolo's a veteran. They were getting the ball out of his hands quickly. He was highly efficient against them. That's not what they're going to do against us. Totally different game plan. They see red when they see this young quarterback out here who's struggling with the blitz. So they're going to come after Sam. And if we don't have a game plan for that, if we can't run the football, and the Raiders struggled to run the ball with any real effectiveness. So they're going to look to shut down the run game and force Sam Howell to beat them. And if he's not capable of doing that without making mistakes, if we can't sustain offense, what we can't allow the Broncos to do, we want more opportunities, not less. When you feel like you're talented, you're not looking for the 8-minute drive. You're trying to quick strike teams because you want the ball back as many times as possible because you think you're capable of scoring. The Broncos right now are trying to lull you to sleep because right now in a talent race, they're not winning without Jerry Jeudy and Tim Patrick and Greg Dulcich. With all the guys that are out, they're not winning in the talent department. So what they're looking to do is slow down the game, right? Speed it up actually, but slow down the pace of the game. Take the ball away from you, keep it in their possession. We got to make sure that they aren't bleeding the clock and that when we look up at the end of this game, we don't have just 7 or 8 possessions. We want to have 11 or 12 possessions. And the way you do that is to get Denver off the field on 3rd downs. which the Raiders were not successful at doing often enough in week number 1. Often enough to win the game, but not often enough to win it decisively. We got to make sure that we're able to get off the field on third downs against them, and we limit the explosive plays they're going to look to get them done. They're desperate. And when you're desperate, you pull out all the stops. Do you think Sean Payton wants to start 0-2 in his Denver Broncos debut as their head coach? You think he wants his message to these players to be, hey, we're going to turn this thing around? These players, these are the same players that were there last year. Now, they didn't start 0-2 last year. I think they won their second game barely against the Texans. But these are human beings we're dealing with. You can fall into the trap real quick of, here we go again. They're going to come out with a level of desperation. We need to match it. We didn't last year against Detroit on the road. We need to match their intensity in this game. And as I've already told you, they've got some special things going on. They're honoring the 25th year anniversary of the 1998 Super Bowl champion team. They're going to be rocking on Sunday night. We got to be able to quiet that crowd and make plays. We'll see what happens, but that's behind enemy lines. It's going to do it for me, your man Louie T, here on Commanders Nightly News. Y'all know what it is. Post up. Take command. I look forward to chopping it up with you guys tomorrow as we get into the game plan and talk about what it's going to take for Washington to get to 2-0 for the first time since 2011. I'll give you my predictions, score and more, and hopefully you'll do the same. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Have a good one.
Here comes the diesel. Here comes the diesel. There's the snap, hand to Riggins. Good hole. He's got the first down to the 40. He's gone.